bright and early, Bath. It's a Monday morning. I'm off to an undisclosed location in Dorset to have a look at a collector's stash and maybe even a bit of book hauling. Okay, so I'm in Dorset today at a little dealership run by a guy called Bob, very nice chap, and this is his collection of stuff that he's selling. He's got his own collection, and like myself, he's been into SF for a very long time, and as you can see, this is an absolutely beautiful stash, smaller than Zardoz. Do check out the Zardoz video if you haven't, but I am really impressed with the absolute beauty of what we have here. Lots of hard covers, so I'm certainly going to be doing a little bit of a book haul, and I'll put a link in the description. And you can't visit, I'll say that again, you can't visit, but you can send Bob a wants list or get in touch, and if you want to get in touch with him, I can pass on the details to you. And he's an exceptionally nice chap, and has very good prices, and he has lots of lovely stuff in amazing condition, as you can see. Really beautiful. And these are all hardcovers here. Absolutely gorgeous. I'm on a bit of a tight time clock today. I can feel another visit coming on with Jules Burt. And yeah, this is absolutely fantastic. He's got all sorts of stuff here, and this is like well over 90% SF and a bit of fantasy and horror. Absolutely gorgeous. We've got ace doubles here. We've got copies of Astounding, for those of you who like the sort of golden age and the long history of Astounding. Paperbacks here, A format, absolutely gorgeous, really nice, and all of this stuff is for sale. And Bob has moved here recently. There's all sorts of magazines and things, and he's been working on this project. So gorgeous. Digest magazines, paperback magazines as Impulse and New World, Science Fantasy. A magazine of fantasy and science fiction. More hard covers here. Nebula, New Worlds, Venture. Fantastic range of magazines. Really quite something. There's all sorts of other pop paperbacks here. There's some westerns and what have you. Lots of new writings in SF. More paperbacks. Absolute cornucopia, as you can see. Really beautiful. Amazing. It's got a lot of pans here together. This is definitely a Jules Burt destination, I feel. So wait till he sees this. Jules, I'm sorry, mate, I didn't invite you along, but I wasn't really sure what to expect. I'd seen some pictures, which Bob sent me, but this is beautiful. He's such a nice guy as well. Nice chat on the way here. Picked me up from the station. What a gent. And I'll say it again, you can't visit, but you can send a wants list, and all this stuff is for sale at very reasonable prices, and some beautiful condition here on the hardcovers, particularly lots of back issues of Interzone here. Yeah, this is so great and lovely. Well, I was thinking I'd only spend about an hour here, but I might be a good bit longer. This is so cool. We're just going to get up the stairs now. Absolute Aladdin's cave. I know that's a cliche, but you know, when you're greeted with something like this, it's just awesome. Lots of proofs there. And this is a work in progress. Bob has only been putting this together very recently. He's moved to this address and has got this wonderful book stash. And as I say, all of this stuff is for sale. So what I'm going to do soon is stop filming and start shopping. Absolutely magnificent. Wouldn't I love a library like this? And the video would have could shut me away and she'd have lots of peace and quiet then. So there we go. Right, well, I'm impressed. And I was in Hay last week, but I just keep seeing things I want to look at. So I think you're going to have to let me indulge myself now. And oh, look at that, more rugby songs. Gosh, I remember selling those. That takes me back to South Wales. Yeah, beautiful. Right, well, I've done some wheeling and dealing with Bob here, and I've had a great time looking through his amazing stash. And as I said, if you want to buy anything, get in touch with me, and there'll be a link in the description below. And we're just looking at some Misses and New Worlds now. Fantastic. Does sex have a future? This is what we want. And obviously we're doing a lot of new wave stuff on the channel at the moment, so just for you to see some of the magazines, brilliant. And this is my favourite magazine cover of all time. And that's Jerry Cornelius, of course. Brian Aldiss' The Firmament Theorem. And of course, that's on the cover of The New Nature of Catastrophe. But look at this beautiful stuff. I mean, this is what you want. So if you like magazines as well, Bob is the man. Absolutely gorgeous. And, you know, he's really tempting me with this now because, you know, this is another rabbit hole one could fall down. And look at that. Bug Jack Barron, Norman Spinrad. Houses of Parliament, why are we giving money to this filth? Oh, man, absolutely historic stuff, it really is. But I'd better stop now because I'm getting too overexcited, and I bet you are too. Next, the book haul. Well, as you can see, I made a new friend yesterday. I managed to restrain myself when I got home from sort of tearing into the book haul, and I thought I'd wait until the morning to shoot it and unwrap it and what have you. So that's what we're doing now. So more information on Bob. Bob got in touch with me and said, "Hi Steve, I'm a dealer. I don't do online very much. I used to do shows, conventions, fairs, what have you. But I am sort of going to up the ante on what I deal. So if you want to get in touch with Bob, you'll find an email address on the screen and in the description of the video below. And as I say, heck of a nice chap, good prices. And yeah, we had a great time. We only spent a couple of hours together. I'm going to go again and have a proper chat with him and stuff because he's he's a guy of my sort of age, a little bit older, still working. And he's just got a fantastic sort of collection of his own work, which I'm hoping to sort of getting to let me shoot because his own collection is absolutely beautiful and wonderfully presented. So hopefully you'll see that in the future. So I'm going to go through what we picked up, and also, as I say, you've seen a quick look at his stuff that's for sale, and that's that all the stuff you saw is for sale. So, you know, fantastic stuff. So do send him your wants list and what have you. So what did I pick up? Well, as I say, I didn't have a lot of time, so I didn't look, you know, in great depth, but because of the practice eye of the Outlaw Bookseller, I can scan shelves and pick out the kind of thing I'm looking for pretty quickly. But as I say, at one point I will go back and have a look in depth. So I have been doing a fair amount of upgrading and replacing more the last few years. There are things I let go of that I wish I kept, and, you know, it's for space and monetary reasons. And some of them have become very hard to acquire again. And often they're books which I read And, you know, I feel I need them in the library again when I read them again. And I recently just read a Robert Silverberg, which I had in the collection for, let me see, I first read it about 40 years ago, longer than that actually. I haven't read it all the way through since, and I've just reread it. And that'll come up in my wrap-up. Yes, I'm going to do a wrap-up for January. Oh, I love these booktube terms. And, you know, I'll talk about that. So, of course, I'm wanting to reread. I've always reread a lot, and I would rather reread a good book 3, 4, 5 times than 6 or 7 bad books, you know, and what have you. So sometimes you've got to be able to judge the quality. So two things I was really pleased to get, which you don't see very often at all in any condition or any format, are the other 2 volumes in the James Blish After Such Knowledge thematic trilogy. Of course, the most famous one, A Case of Conscience, is always in print, but I'm delighted to have again Dr. Mirabiles, is Blish's historical novel about Roger Bacon, the heretical scientist monk of the medieval period. And this is a Panther one from the 70s, and I had a beautiful 80s Arrow one which I wish I'd kept, and you know, you try and find it, you can't find them when you do them in the States. I was really pleased to get that. So this is great, and I have read it, but it's been a long time, so I'm looking forward to rereading it. And I think I'll probably understand Blish's themes a little bit more this time around, and they are, you know, about heresy and religion and ideas. It's really interesting stuff. And equally, I was very pleased to get this beautiful Penguin copy of Black Easter, which is the other one in the thematic trilogy. Look at that, absolutely gorgeous. And this is a very collectible book simply because it's a black SF Penguin, but again, hard to get. And I do wish Gollancz would get their fingers pulled out and reissue the whole trilogy. They should do it, because they would sell, because people are keen to read them and they're hard to get. And this, of course, is the Black Magic one. So really interesting stuff. So very pleased to get both of those back there. Blish, of course, an inconsistent, if interesting writer. He died very young. He was about 54 when he died. And, you know, he was somebody who was kind of assailed by the new wave. There's a famous piece by John Clute, which is in New Worlds, and it pops up regularly in sort of anthologies and stuff, where, you know, John Clute has a bit of a go at Blish, and he says that he's massively inconsistent, and I think that's probably true, but at his best he was very good indeed, and his critical cachet does seem to be rising these days, so I'll be revisiting them, so that'll be great fun. I'll let you know what I think. Then I bought an edition of a book which I've owned for decades, but I haven't owned this alternative edition, and this is a dual book, and it's Michael G. Coney, Michael Greatorex Coney, and this is The Jaws That Bite, The Claws That Catch. Look at that. I know Jules Burt showed this in his Door Covers rundown recently, and I've never owned this edition. Let's see, when did it come out? It's a first printing, March 75, and there's an illustration which shows the influence of Jaws there as well. And yes, there are sharks in this, alien sharks. And the first, I say the first edition, the UK edition hardcover, is this book, which has a different title, The Girl with a Symphony in Her Fingers, from Elmfield Press. I bought this in Hay-on-Wye about 1 million years ago, and it's got a tear on the jacket. It's about the only hardcover book I've got that's got a tear to the actual front of the jacket, and I must replace this at some point. I do like Coney, he's really good, and great sort of straight ahead stuff. I've often said about him that what I really like is his rather sentimental and adolescent approach to sort of romance in his books, which is charming, and, you know, possibly a bit YA-ish, but I never saw it that way. I just saw it as overheated, really. And so that's those two there. Same book, different title. Why? I'm not certain. Both titles are equally striking, I must say. They're really, really good. So, and super lurid. Queen's Award for lurid is something we often give on this channel. So there you go. I do feel the urge to give this one a bit of a clean before I show it to you, because it really is an estate, actually. And this is a book which I did have one on my Abe wish list from a dealer who I've bought lots from, but who hasn't been active for some time, and his stuff is fantastic. That's Mike at Fine Editions, and he had a copy on his page on Abe, but it was £17 and pristine. Now with Mike, when you buy something that's pristine, it is pristine, and this is, I say, is less so, but it's an uncommon book, and There was a Greg Press hardcover, so maybe I'll try and get that at some point. There's a bit of a chip in the top of the jacket, and that's The 10th Victim by Robert Sheckley. Now, if you know Sheckley, of course, you know that this is an expansion of his short story, The 7th Victim. Now, it was expanded into a novel later because it was picked up, and for some reason Sheckley was big in Italy, and he lived in the Mediterranean. I think he lived in Ibiza, the one of the Balearics, for quite some time. This is in the 70s, but in the 60s he was quite big in Italy. And basically, The 10th Victim was filmed as The 10th Victim with Ursula Andress and Marcello Mastroianni, get the pronunciation right, Steve. And it's a charming film, and I'll talk about it again another time. I could get the Blu-ray out, but it's under a pile of stuff and smudges sitting on the top. What can you do? So that's that, and it's expansion. It's a nice fleet novel, economical, and let's see, it's less than 150 pages. What a relief. And it's probably one of Sheckley's more structured things. And I see The 7th Victim, which was, I think, first published, I think even Galaxy, or the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, to the late 50s, as being the sort of founding text of the kill game genre. You know, all these things which are like rollerball and, you know, the Hunger Games and all that, these sort of game-based things. And, you know, and obviously they go back before that, but Sheckley is the person I think of as being the sort of founder in that, in terms of a satirical sense. So, you know, this is really, really great. And I tend to buy any Sheckley I come across, except the really late stuff when, you know, he does lots of collaborations with other people and they don't always come off. Up until the early 80s, you know, he is the man, you know, Voltaire and soda, as Brian Aldiss said. So I'm pleased with that. Then, another blast from the past, a book which I had this edition way back in the early 80s, and it was only the second book I read by this author. And I don't know what happened to it. It sort of went by the wayside, and I've been looking out for a copy of this edition. I've got another edition, and it has been issued as part of a hardcover omnibus from Subterranean in the USA recently, but the price of postage is more than the book, so it's prohibitive. And that's Robert Silverberg's The Man in the Maze, which I consider his breakthrough novel, and the book which really marks his beginning as the best SF writer in the world at that time. A lot of people cite Thorns. I'm fonder of this, and this is a wonderful book. And this is a tandem edition from early 1971, 5 shillings. I know it's 71 because it says inside, but also I remember well, Decimalisation of Britain came in February 1971, so this is obviously from that time, and absolutely fantastic book. You've never read this. This is a superb novel about transcendence, transformation, redemption, classic Silverberg themes, and it's absolutely marvellous. And I just, you know, the urge to pick it up and read it is so strong because I've just finished rereading another Silverberg, another old one, as I say, and I just felt like plunging straight back into this. But there's a lot of other things to be read, but I will read it again. I've read it 3 times that I can think of. Magnificent. Pick it up. An underrated classic in his canon. And Neil Gaiman thinks so too, so there you go. So that's that one. Brian Stableford. Stableford. Written loads and loads of books. This is A Door. This is Balance of Power, which is one of the Daedalus sextet. There are 6 of these, and this is volume 5. And I would prefer the Hamlin ones, if I'm honest. I like the Hamlin ones, and I'm only missing one now. Which one am I missing? Let's have a look. I'm missing City of the Sun. So if ever I see them in Hamlin, I'll pick them up. But I've got a feeling that the later ones were they published in Hamlin? Yes, they were, because this has got a really great cover in the Hamlin edition. It's a spaceship cover, but it's very hard to find a good nick. And I saw one in Hay, and it had this huge crease along there, and I thought, oh, great. But I thought, I'll leave it. My prince will come someday, as they say. So that's that. Great little series, and I do like Stableford in the 70s. His routine stuff is like miles better than everybody else's good stuff a lot of the time. You know, that's the thing. So marvellous stuff. Balance of Power, Stableford. And they're basically about a starship mission going to other planets. There's lots of biology in them. He's really good at biology and sociology, anthropology, those sort of things. And he often has very terse sort of characters who are sort of awkward and don't sort of fit and what have you, and they don't want to fit. They can be quite spiky, and I really like the way he does that. Keith Roberts does that really well, actually, and I recently read a wonderful story by Keith in one of the new writings of SF books. I think it's number 21, called The Passing of the Dragons, which was actually the title of a collection in the States. And I think in the UK it's in, I can't think it's in one of the other collections. It's not Machines and Men, I can't remember which one it's in. But it's a great story, and it sounds like a fantasy story, but it's a space exploration biology story, and it's really about the character, and the narrator is a behaviorist, and it's about his relationship with the other people on the mission, who are all rather sort of not straight-laced, but they're playing a role, they're playing a part, and they're not being themselves. And it's about how people play parts, and how if you don't play a role, and how you're yourself in society, that you don't sort of always have an easy time. But it's a great story, Passing of the Dragon, so do read it. It's fantastic. The writing is so good, and again, I read it and I just thought I just want to read loads of Keith now. So the Keith Roberts features are coming. I know I keep saying this, but I want to shoot them outdoors, I want to shoot them in the summer, and I want to shoot them in the English countryside, because that's Keith's jam. Anyway, moving on. This is another replacement. This is a book I had in this edition and I got rid of. This is a much nicer copy, and I have disparaged him a bit in the charm recently. I think I do need to revisit him in a major way, and I got rid of lots of his books, so I need to reacquire them. They're quite hard to find now, and this is one of those authors whose books you don't see. When I went to Hay on Wye last week, used to go, and certain people you'd see a lot, but the people who vanished pretty much altogether, Jack Vance, Fritz Lieber, Silverberg is nearly all gone. Moorcock, tiny little bit there. You never find Ellis, and they haven't for years and years and years. You never find Philip K. Dick. You just don't find these people. Gene Wolfe. I mean, Gene Wolfe, honestly, I don't know where all the Gene Wolfe books have gone. I know they've gone. People have bought them and they're keeping them. But you cannot get Gene Wolfe books for love or money these days. Not even in bad condition. They're just not out there. So, anyway, Fritz Lieber, A Spectre is Haunting Texas. And what a wacky cover that is. And I have read this, and I was moved and reminded about picking it up, because when I met Alan Lloyd, hi Alan, in Hay, and we had a bit of a chat, you'll have seen in the second Hay vlog, I flash a few books which he bought, but we didn't look at all of them. One of them was a door edition of this, which was really nice actually, and I wish we'd filmed the rest, because he had some Tom dishes which are uncommon too. But yeah, there you go. Unbroken Spine, the usual Outlook bookseller standard, beautiful stuff. So that was all the novels. So there's nothing particularly new there. It's all old stuff, but it's all goodies. Then the anthologies book, of course, is the big thing these days. It is starting to fade a bit, and maybe this is the last book haul where you'll see an awful lot of them, but there are more. One of the most noted anthologists and critics in the history of SF was Damon Knight, and Damon's a funny one. I must say, I've read novels by him and short stories, and he does really have his moments when he blows you away. And other stuff I think, oh, it's okay, but he had high standards critically, and he was a good editor. And he's most known as an editor really these days for the series Orbit. Now, they were one of these a year, and they lasted for about 12, 13 years, maybe longer. The early ones from the late 60s and early 70s are the most acclaimed, and this is Orbit 1 in Panther. And look at that, absolutely classic. I like that really sort of hard, cold, merciless look that Panther had then in the late 60s. They're not making it easy for you. They're not super colourful. And I guess maybe Penguin were influenced, or they cross-influenced each other with a black livery. I guess we'll see. So here we go. And what's in here? Great stuff. Kate Wilhelm. Now, of course, Kate Wilhelm is his wife. So, was there nepotism? Who can say? Maybe an old insider knows. Blish, Richard McKenna, who I keep mentioning. I'll talk about Richard McKenna at some point. And there are a few female authors in here. There's one called Alison Rice, who I've never heard of, so that'll be interesting. Virginia Kidd and Sonia Dorman are kind of forgotten figures now, but they're quite interesting. There's a Dish and a Keith Roberts in there, so that's great stuff. Lovely condition. You do see these, but they're usually in a state. And Bob had a few copies of this one, and one of them is still back, but I picked up this one first, so I went with this one. This is Orbit 2. From the following year, and let's look what year this is, just to put it into context for you. So we're looking at, let's see, it's published by Rapp and Whitting in 68, collected in 67, so there you go. And this is 1970 edition, and absolutely gorgeous, as you can see, a bit of hardware on there, nice blue. I do like the blue, as you know. And again, absolutely fantastic stuff. And Orbit was regarded as being, you know, the best anthology series of its time. Lots of winners in there, award winners. There's 2 Joanna Russes in here. There's a Gene Wolfe, Kate Wilhelm again, R.A. Lafferty, Kit Reed, Aldis. Great stuff. Richard McKenna again. And, you know, Damon Knight did say that he would read loads and loads and loads and pick up what he felt were the best. So he does sort of certain authors pop up a few times. The first one of them that I picked up going through Bob's stash was Orbit 3, which is this one here. Very, very nice. Again, these are all Panther, Unbroken Spines. And in this, there's 9 stories, and 2 of them won Nebulas that year. Best Novelette and Best Short Story, and they were by Richard Wilson and Kate Wilhelm. There's also Farmer, Richard McKenna again, Joanna Russ again, Gene Wolfe again, James Sallis, who is an obscure New Wave figure but famous as a crime noir writer. And I watched Drive the other night, actually, first time in years, which was based on his novel. Fantastic. And Drive looks more like a science fiction film than most science fiction films. It's got that sort of California saturated neon and great synth music and stuff. You know, there's no speculative elements, but it just feels more like an SF novel than, or an SF film, I should say, than most of the SF films being made. It reeks more of the future, even though it's set in the present. You know, it's all about the presentation as much as the content sometimes. So in here, what do we have? There's a story called Why They Mobbed the White House by Doris Pitkin Buck. And you think of the Donald Trump thing, so that's sort of interesting, isn't it? And yeah, I've read the Farmer and the Sallis in here. And yeah, great stuff. So 2 award winners in there. And Bob did have other volumes, but I stopped with number 4. And isn't that absolutely gorgeous? Classic early 70s Panther cover. Orbit 4. It is a bit dinged on the back then, if you can see that, but I can cope because it's absolutely fantastic, beautiful looking, and it's got that wonderful typeface, you know, which is such a 70s future typeface, and it still seems futuristic to me now. I absolutely love it. So what have we got in here? Kate Wilhelm again, Charles L. Harness, Harlan Ellison Shattered Like a Glass Goblin, his wonderful anti-Vietnam drug story, which is just brilliant. If you've never read Shattered Like a Glass Goblin, wow. I think it's in the US or revised editions of The Beast of Shouted Love at the Heart of the World, where it seems out of place to me, but that's because I'm so used to my old Pan edition and the contents of that. Carl Emshwiller, you don't hear much about. Lafferty again. The short version of Werner Vinge's first novel, Grimm Story. There's Silverberg's Passengers, classic stuff. And James Sallis is A Few Last Words, which is a great New Wave story. Absolutely lovely. So those are the paperbacks, and very pleased with those. And Bob, as you saw, had a lot of hardcovers. He does lots of paperbacks as well, as you will have seen. So there's all sorts of lovely stuff there. So do get in touch with your wants and what have you, and he'll do you good. Well, hardcovers. So we're going to stick with the anthology kick for now, because that's just the way we roll. And, you know, there will be more novels coming. I promise we're getting fed up with anthologies by now. And I thought I'd wait to unwrap these, as most of these are still in their bags. Bob's bagged more or less everything on the hardcover front, which is really good. So I'm just going to see if I can unbag this one. And of course, you try and unbag anything while you're talking, and it just doesn't work. So this is a book that I used to have, and I sold, and I bought it when it first came out, which must have been the early 90s. And it's a lovely anthology. And as you see, it's a hardcover. And this is the Oxford Book of Science Fiction Stories from Oxford University Press, edited by Tom Shippey, who Bob told me he knows and is fairly local to him, apparently. And I got this signed by Gibson and Sterling on the title pages of their stories, and, you know, on separate occasions in the 90s. So, but I sold it on because, of course, you know, getting Gibson and Sterling signatures together in an unusual place is quite an interesting thing. And what I remember about this book is it had a really nice binding. Let me just take the jacket off. Yeah, that's beautiful. Look at that. Gilt cased. Absolutely lovely. And this is nice. Oxford University Press. Proper academic stuff, not messing around. And there's a great quotation on the back from Burning Chrome by Bill. And there's an interesting introduction into it by the editor, by Tom Shippey. He writes about science fiction being fabril, a literature of fabrication and machinery and what have you. And I didn't quite buy it, but I'm going to reread it because it was interesting. And this has all sorts of wonderful stuff in it. And it goes back to Wells with The Land Ironclads, a seminal Wells story. Kipling, Williamson, Martian G. Weinbaum's Stanley G. Weinbaum's Martian Odyssey, a pre-Golden Age classic, and Weinbaum died very young. John W. Campbell Jr., Simak, Lewis Paget, who is of course Kuttner and Moore. We've got Van Vogt, Schmitz, Clark, Walter M. Miller, Fred Paul, Aldis, Ballard, Cordwainer Smith, Lagan, Blish, Harrison, Dish, Wolfe, Niven, Spinrad. It just goes on and on and on. Raccoon Sheldon, James Tiptree Jr., George R. R. Martin's Way of Cross and Dragon, probably one of his best. Sterling, Gibson, Hilbert Schenk, we'll come to Hilbert Schenk soon, Paul J. Macaulay and David Brin. So it goes up to 1990 from pretty much the turn of the century, and that's a great anthology. If you ever see it, pick it up. Beautiful stuff, isn't that lovely? Look at that, great wraparound stuff, and a flying saucer. The heresy of the flying saucer on the cover, you can't go wrong really. So what else have we got? Well, also looking old school in anthologies, we have Decade, the 1940s. These were edited, this series, by Harrison and Aldis. Did lots of editing back in the day, those guys. And these were sort of pan paperbacks, and they're quite hard to find in good nick. And this one is a hardcover, as you see. Just get the bag off. Wow, lovely shiny laminate. Look at that. Shiny, happy anthologies holding hands. Lovely, nice and simple, slightly sort of pulpy cover design there with an issue of Astounding. And this is all the usual suspects you'd expect. Nice inside. This is an ex-library book or something like that actually, but it's in good nick because Bob, yeah, Lambeth Amenity Services. Marvellous stuff. And Van Vogt, Asimov, Hal Clement, Simak, Eric Frank Russell, a couple of obscure names in there. Really, really nice. Super. So that'll go in the sort of anthologies thing. And Bob's a big Golden Age guy, more so than me. So hopefully if he lets me shoot his stuff, you'll see some beautiful Golden Age hardcover first, which will be lovely. Of course, they weren't published in the Golden Age because they weren't any SF books then, really. They were published afterwards in the 1950s. So what else do we have? Well, an anthology I showed on the channel recently in the New Wave anthologies bit was the very wonderful The New SF, and I think I've only seen this in hardcover once, so I snapped this up because it's one of my favourite anthologies, and I'm just going to pop it out of the bag. Lovely. I haven't even looked at this yet, so you can see how excited I am. Great stuff. Nice soft bags. And it's got a Liz Hutchinson. There you go, there's the Hutchinson bull at the base of the spine, at the heel of the spine. It's got a little bit of jacket wear, but you know, this is a very uncommon book and a very historic book, especially for a New Wave fan like me, and I need to do some cleaning around the extremities. It is price clipped. I'm not the least bit bothered by price clips. Some people go mad about it, but I really don't mind myself. So there you go. It's a lovely modernist font that you really can't see that. I love that font. That I say font, I mean typeface, and yeah, this is great stuff. So lovely. And I've recently upgraded my paperback, and I do love that anthology. There's more about it in the New Wave Anthologies video, so I won't talk more about it now, but great stuff. Then, new writings in SF has been very much on the agenda recently, and I've got a few copies of that, a few issues. They're not editions, they're issues, because it's like a magazine, and it's happened about 2 or 3 times a year, and there were 30 altogether. And the ones I'm going to show you are all Sidgwick ones. I do like Sidgwick, as you know. The Sidgwick ones started with, I think, issue 21. They were Dobson until then. And the Dobson ones are very hard to find, and they're not usually in great nick. I've got one of them, which is mint. I bought it pretty much new. And maybe I'll try and pick up some of them another time. But I'm trying to get all the Sidgwick ones, and I'm sort of close to it now. And this is number 24. Have a quick look at that. And I just like the livery. I like the simplicity of it. And this one, because it's predominantly white, needs a bit of a clean, so I'll get to work on that. Great stuff. So this means that with a little tranche I've purchased here, I do have some duplicate paperbacks, so they'll be moved on. They'll go on eBay in a few weeks' time when I can find some time. And, you know, it's interesting because, you know, a lot of the names in these, as I've said, you know, they're really obscure, and you suspect that some have only ever appeared in these anthologies. So that's 24. And this one is 25. Bob has a few of most of these. He only had one of the 24, so I had that, haha. But he has got multiples of several of the others. And this one, there's somebody selling this on Abe and eBay. Well, there's not, so they haven't actually sold it because they're asking like 25 quid for it, and it's not in great nick, which is ridiculous. And, you know, Bob's got a few, so I'm sure he'd do you a decent deal on it. So we'll just pop that out of there. And I would leave these bagged, but they're not going in the supposed damp corner in the hideout. And that's number 25. Trippy, look at that. That is so psychedelic. Green and red. The nice big SF on the back of the jacket. And again, looking at the names in here, Charles Partington, sort of new wave related figure. Always nice to see stuff by him. Wolfgang Jeschke, who's German. Some, you know, very routine names used to pop up in New Worlds as well before Moorcock took it on in '64 when Carnell was the original editor, and then he moved on to New Writings. So there you go. So I'm pleased with that. Get that there as well. Oh, they're lovely. Great stuff. So I do have a couple more of these to go through. Then we have 28, which as you see is orange and blue, super lurid. So we'll just pop that out as well. And of course, Bob and I were talking about how back in those days, you didn't see a lot of hardcover SF in bookshops. There weren't many big bookshops in Britain. You know, you could order it, obviously, and fans and serious readers did order stuff. But apart from the frontline bestseller names, you didn't see hardcovers very much. And we went to sort of newsagent outlets like Smith's and Menzies, which are the biggest booksellers in the UK. They didn't keep hardcovers very much at all, and certainly not sort of more backlisty stuff. So there's number 28. Lovely. Great stuff. And Aldous again, more obscure names. I mean, who are these people? Leroy Kettle, Graham Lehman. I'm sure there's some old school fans screaming at the screen now and telling me off. But, you know, you've got to learn this stuff throughout your life. It takes time. And yeah, there's a Robert Holdstock in here where he's sort of credited as Robert P. Holdstock. And again, lots of obscure names. E.C. Tubb, who was a real standfast of New Worlds, great space opera writer. So there you go. So that's another one. Finally, in that tranche, I got number 29. This was the last of the hardcovers. Number 30 was never done in hardcover. It was a paperback original from Corgi. So that one I acquired recently. And that's the hardest one to find, actually, if you're just collecting them per se. Number 30 is very much the hardest one to find. And I came across one in Hay, which was great because I was starting to feel that I'd probably never find a decent one, and I found quite a nice one. So there's number 29. There we go. And Charles Partington again, E.C. Tubb again, Aldous again, Cherry Wilder, who I think is from New Zealand. Stuff was published by Unwin in the 80s. And this one does have a fair amount of dust on it, actually. I'm going to give that a really good clean. So I need to do some work on that. But like I say, Bob has multiples of most of these. So if you're trying to complete your collection, there you go. So yeah, good stuff. And again, lots of obscure names that you never sort of see. So there we are. So New Writings was very much, it was original anthology. It was hardly ever reprinted anything. Though I noticed there's an M. John Harrison story called The Macbeth Expiation, which I think comes up in number 9 and number 13. I don't quite know what's going on there. So that's bizarre. So maybe I'll ask Mike about that sometime if I get to do an interview with him, which I'm hoping to do at some point, because we haven't seen each other for some years. So that'll be interesting. So that's all our anthologies. Just to finish that off, I was slightly intrigued by these. Sidgwick used to do these things called SF specials, and they were mostly 2 or 3 novels done in hardcover, laminated boards, very cheaply put together. They always look terrible. Some of them, ironically, were first hardcovers for important SF books, but this is one of, and they would just sort of mesh 2 of their books that they'd done as silvers or what have you into one, and they're mostly for libraries. And this is New Writings and SF Special 3. And I like the blue and yellow. I like the sort of fungi on the cover. And I like the sort of simplicity and the chunkiness of these. And I bought this just to represent the series in this form in my library. And basically this is 28 and 29. So I've already bought them. But it was so cheap and really interesting. And, you know, it is very much about the iconography of those days for me with these things. you know, everything now is very slick. It's quite nice to go back to simplicity. And I think you remember that Chris Priest said in the interview I did with him that his favourite jacket design is just his name and a title on a cover, which you never get these days. Though Faber did that a couple of times for him in the late 70s, early 80s, so there you go. On to novels. I got 4 hardcover novels, and they are things which I've been meaning to get for a while, and one thing which I got rid of and I wish I never had. And this is A Rose for Armageddon by Hilbert Schenk and Alison and Busby. This is not that uncommon, but it's hard to get in good nick, and this is in beautiful nick. You should pick it up for about £5, and it's a novel I haven't read, and I do want to read it. It's been coming close to the top of the list, and I'm told it's very, very good, and I feel bad I haven't read it because I've known about it for decades. And it's got that, again, a lovely futurist typeface on there. Absolutely gorgeous. And I'm going to keep that in the bag. I'm going to wrap that in my leisure. But isn't that beautiful? And it's nice and slim and economical, which is what I like. If you're wondering what I'm reading at the moment, it's there. There's Richard Cadre, Kamikaze L'amour, a novel of the future from 1995. And it's got that lovely open, breathable, sharp, fresh cyberpunk thing. And it's set, say, 1995 is set in early 2000s, so it's in the past for us now. And it's about a rock star who experiences synesthesia, and he can sort of see sounds and hear colours and what have you. And his band play a big gig on New Year's Eve, 1999. And then he commits suicide, or tries to, by taking a load of pills in vodka. But he's sort of spirited away by his manager to a priory type place, and everybody thinks he's dead, and he assumes a new identity and goes out into San Francisco Bay Area, which has strangely become overgrown by tropical plants and jungle, a bit like Ballard's Drowned World. And I'm only about 30 pages in, but it's really good, so I'll tell you more about that when I do a February wrap up, he said laughingly. But good stuff, nice and fleet, lots of space in it, but very stylized as well, which I really like. Some cyberpunk stuff is very dense, but this is really nicely measured, and it's mid-90s. At that point, some of the stylistic excesses of those sort of guys have settled down a bit, and yeah, very, very good indeed so far. So, Silverberg, At Winter's End. Now, again, not an uncommon book, but getting harder to find in good nick. This is Gollancz, and this was the first of 2 volumes. I picked up a paperback of this a while ago, and I've got volume 2 in hardcover, and I thought, why did I pick up a paperback? It's very thick, very hard to read without breaking the spine, even for the Outlaw bookseller. So I thought I'd pick up this Gollancz one, and I saw it, and absolutely gorgeous. And, you know, this is a sort of post-Ice Age narrative. Big chunky book. There's Bob looking urbane on the back as ever. So I'm pleased to get that. What have we got? Nice yellow boards. Lovely. So yes, I'm pleased to get that. So I can now read that little diptych. It's not a duology. There's no such thing as a duology. That's an incorrect term made up by somebody who didn't know the correct term. It's diptych. It's always been diptych. So that's part 1 of that diptych. And really nice, great book like that. Nice, royal, solid, chunky, something you can get into. It'll happen. Tiny little ding on the front cover, but we can cope. Then a book I was very pleased to see, which often goes for silly money. I got it for a reasonable sum. And this is a book which I used to have and I got rid of, and I wish I'd kept. And this is a really, really beautiful, wow, 1990s book from Grafton, which makes it, it's not 1990, Steve, that makes it late 80s. Let's have a look. Let's see. 91 actually. So Grafton was around longer than I thought. I couldn't quite remember. And this is The Bone Forest by Robert Holstock. Look at that. Isn't that absolutely gorgeous? And this is one of the Mythagor Wood sequence. If you don't read fantasy but you do read SF, one thing you should read is the Mythagor Wood series, particularly the first one, Mythagor Wood, won the World Fantasy Award in 1974. And it's about 2 brothers who live on the edge of a wood in sort of the marches, sort of between Wales and England. Well, it's not between, it's in England, but, you know, historically it probably would have been Wales. And in this wood, their father's been doing research, and there's like a time vortex in there, and the avatars of British folk heroes can all be found there. And it's pretty spooky and strange and dark and scary and wet, and in a good way, and it's great. And that's The Bone Forest. Absolutely beautiful. So I'm really pleased to have that back in the library, because I wish I'd never let it go. It was a time when I needed the money. Fantastic. Gorgeous. All these are firsts, of course. Finally, another uncommon book, which I didn't buy at the time. Now this book, I think, was, and it's huge as you can see, was in the States. I think it was split into 2 books. Something tells me it was split into 4, but it can't have been. It must have split into 2, which is weird because, you know, I thought in the USA they liked things big, you know, but it was a while ago. And this is Mary Gentle, and this is Ash, A Secret History, which is a fantasy novel and female sword and sorcery. Absolutely huge, as you can see, and it's Gollancz, even though it looks more like a Grafton book in many ways. And Mary Gentle, a neglected figure. She had a certain amount of attention in the 80s, and I met her once. She's very nice, and I think she's still active. She had a new book out late last year, which I haven't seen yet, which I must get a copy in and have a look at it. And I'm just going to pop this out, and this is very, very uncommon indeed in any form, and it's very critically acclaimed, and it's so big I don't want to sort of tear anything, or I think I need to pull the tape aside at the side of the bag. Pop it out of here. Look at that, what a tome. I probably won't get around to reading this for years because it's so huge, and it's, let's see, it's over 1,000 pages long, so it could have been split into 4. For me it would have been better, but apparently it's really good, and I decided recently I wanted a copy. That's it, lion at the top there. Very, very smart. And apparently this is the thing, so you know, probably the biggest fantasy novel ever published in a single volume. Only once or twice a decade does a book come along. There's both breathtaking its ambition and extraordinary its storytelling. Apparently this is it, and it was 20 quid. Now when is this? This is early 90s, I would say again. It's late now, 1999. So if you think that's 20 quid then, and a lot of hardback novels by top figures have gone up to £25 last year, so that just shows you hardback fiction hasn't gone up in price as much as you think. That's the thing. So that's Ash, A Secret History by Mary Gentle. So there we go. So that's the book haul. So that gives you an idea of the kind of quality of things that Bob has there. So if you want to get in touch, do get in touch with them. If you're struggling to find the links, what have you, let me know. And I sort of better get myself together now and go out, because, you know, we've had this trouble with the boiler and what have you. And those of you on the channel who've been really supportive, but it really has been an utter drag when I'm trying to relax on holiday. Anyway, bye for now.